This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
Ever since I, at about the age of 14, got my hands on digital art software, I have been intrigued by the artistic possibilities of animation. It is something that I've always wanted to get at least the tiniest bit proficient at, and if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know it's something that I tend to sprinkle into my videos here and there whenever I have the time to do so. I would classify what I've done in the past on this channel more along the lines of an animatic, so even whenever it comes to my more polished work, my experience in any kind of actual animation is extremely limited. All that being said, trying to practice and learn animation in a more applied sense, where you're actually paying attention to timing and the principles of animation, is always something that I've wanted to do. So I thought, what better an opportunity to practice animation than on a week when my art block is so bad that it probably won't allow me to draw anything else besides the same pose over and over again. So this week, I'm gonna do something that a lot of early animators do to practice, and that is a walk cycle. Front and side walk cycle are kind of foundational to an early animation experience to start getting the grasp of movement and start applying the principles of animation. And I have pretty much never done either of those things. I have sort of animated run cycles in the past, but they were not very good. I also preface all of this in this entire video with the disclaimer of I am an artist that never went to art school, didn't go to animation school, I'm getting all this from the internet, and I frankly don't know what I'm doing. This video is mostly just to take you along with me on my journey and share in my pain and struggles, and maybe by the end we'll both learn something, hopefully. I'm hoping to complete in this video a side walk cycle, a front walk cycle, and maybe some limited animation for a background and elements between those to kind of merge them together into a looping clip. I'm going to try to do all this with my Night of Sea Rose Thornblade because she is my comfort character and she's easy enough for me to draw repetitively. Also for the animation style and that sort of thing, I will be keeping to my color blocked lineless style for this video because line work is not something that I'm very good at in illustration, so I'm not going to be tackling line work and animation this week, but I've gathered a ton of animation reference in my Pinterest. I'm going to be looking up tutorials and videos as I go, so if I get stuck, I can reference things and sort of figure out what the problem is. And of course, the other thing that I'm going to do if I need it is take video reference of myself doing the movements so that I can really nail down exactly what I need. I also want to have character to her movement because that's a big part of what makes animation interesting, so I don't want this to turn out generic. I do want this to be a very intentional night lady strut. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
So day one was about roughing out both of the animation cycles and trying to get the key poses down. I started with the front walk cycle because this angle tends to be one that I struggle to draw even whenever the body isn't in motion. So with the help of a few references on this first pass, I really tried to focus on getting the perspective of the knees right and get that arching motion in there, and also tried to focus on getting the offset motion of the hips and the shoulders right, especially since I decided to have her holding a sword in this cycle, and that would change the movement a little bit.
Okay, so I have finished the first pass of the initial rough animation and I put it into my software to time it and kind of see if it looks right. Yes, we are in Davinci Resolve now. This is what we've generally got so far and I'm actually pretty happy with it. That's pretty solid movement. Obviously, I need a little bit more work on top, like the sword is not really aligned and the arms need to be roughed out a little bit more. But the overall leg movement I think is pretty good. It's basically doing what I need it to do. One thing that really came in handy that I did to help me track was adding a little line for the knees so that I know like general motion that they're supposed to be going in, because it's sort of an arc, one replaces the other, you know, as you put weight on the opposite foot. So that's something I got from a reference that I was using and it worked very well. Like I mentioned, I think the legs look pretty good overall, but I think that I could add a little bit more motion to the hip area and the chest area to kind of show her weight shifting. The arms need to be all the way like rendered out, put into place. I mean, it's just a stick figure at this point. For the sword animation, I need to make sure the blade stays consistent because whenever I took a little bit of animation reference for this, I noticed the blade naturally would kind of like skew up and down as her arm moved as she walked. So I want to make sure that that looks natural and the blade isn't like shrinking or stretching out or warping as she moves. Also hair. That's just gonna be a whole thing. Also hair. Let's see if I can figure this out.
For my second pass, I began defining the shapes in the actual character design, roughing in her armor, adding details to her arms and sword, and I also began adding in a very rough volume to represent the flow of her hair. At this point, I was working later in the evening, so instead of refining the front walk even more, I decided to begin roughing in the key poses of the sidewalk based on the reference I had on hand. However, there was a pretty immediate difference in the energy of these two walks, since the reference I had for the front walk was a lot less cartoony than the one I used for the sidewalk, which will become an issue later on since they're supposed to loop together in the final sequence. sequence. As a beginner animator, it was an interesting challenge to figure out what level of exaggeration I wanted to apply to the movement. The rough sidewalk I ended up with was very energetic and expressive, but it just didn't suit Rose's personality that well. It was a difficult balance to make Rose's walk look strong and powerful, but also a little refined and reserved. So this session gave me a lot to think about going forward, but that ended up being an issue for Next Day Kira. But before Next Day Kira gets on that...
So recently I've been less inclined to post my work on social media for a number of reasons. Some of you guys can probably take a guess at those, which is why it's so nice to have a portfolio on Squarespace where I can showcase my illustrations and crafts all in one place. It is incredibly simple to upload new batches of my illustrations to their various galleries, since their automatic image scaling tools can arrange and size my galleries for me. And the process of getting my site going in the first place was just as intuitive, which is very important if you're super busy like me. I was able to choose from dozens of their professionally designed templates and customize my site colors, text, website pages, and overall design. And I'm also regularly able to easily go in and update that design as my brand art changes. However, if you're not sure what kind of look you want for your site, their new Blueprint AI system can generate your website's design, pages, and details based off your preferences, flavor your written descriptions with the tone that suits your brand, and offer integrated SEO tools to get your site in search results for the people who are looking for your kind of work. And Squarespace even has an integrated e-commerce platform, which really comes in handy as an artist, since so many of us sell prints and merchandise of our creations, and I especially like their custom merch, which partners with a print-on-demand service to avoid overproduction by handling inventory, production, and shipping for you. And with new flexible payment options, including credit cards, PayPal, and Apple Pay, and the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay in eligible countries, purchasing from your online store is now even more accessible for your customers. So if you want to create your own designated gallery or sell your own personalized wares, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/PricklyAlpaca to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks as always to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Hello, welcome back to the pain and fear of animation. And the me you are getting back to is me sitting in the same place on the same day, wearing the same outfit. Hi. So last night I completed my second rough pass on the front walking animation, and this is what she looks like. I'm so excited. It looks like something. So obviously there's still a couple of issues with this. Overall, I like the leg movement for the most part, and the way the armor is fitting on her body and moving with her I think is pretty good. The arm movement, especially on her left arm, could be a little bit more natural. The sword in her right arm could be a little bit improved. The next pass would definitely be to go in, apply a few of those animation principles to make it look a little flowier, give it more energy. Something I did do on this pass whenever I was going through is give her a little bit more hip and chest rotation as she walks, which I really like the effect of. I think it does a good job of like selling the movement a little bit more. But sharks, that is not all that I have to offer to you. Can I also offer for your consideration a slightly messed up, awkward sidewalk cycle? You might want to sit down for this one. This is what we got so far for the sidewalk, which, have you seen such a prominent strut? The gate is so wide on this. Two animations in my mind for this final scene are supposed to run together, so it literally goes from this comfortable gait and pace to just hello. Especially considering there's a very subtle head bob in this one. My reference was a little different on each of these, so like white line here, white line there. It's just something that I need to fix in terms of like proportion. So I think the next pass is going to be the last pass of animation cleanup before I go in and start actually doing like the final cleanup with my color block technique. And then a huge thing that I also need to do, figure out how to make backgrounds work for both of these, especially the front one, because how to make things look like they have the illusion of movement and perspective. From that perspective in particular, I really don't know how to do yet. The side one should be fine. The front one, I'm at least a little panicked about. I feel decently confident because I've at least got something here. Like, the animation is animating. Because sometimes you start a video project where you're like, I haven't done this before, and then you just flat out don't know if you're gonna be able to do it. I am gonna finish cleaning up these animations though, and then I'll worry about that later. Let's do it.
Getting into the final pass, this is where I really focused on the little details and trying to tweak the movements as much as I could before going into actually adding color. So this meant really defining the shapes of the armor and the sword and the hair. And of course, because I was kind of going ham on the secondary motion for this animation cycle, I absolutely had to include Rose's cape.
No kicks!
So I was familiar with the principles of animation before working on this video, but since my scope of animation experience is very limited, there are quite a few that I didn't really get to put into practice until now. A few that I found to be both particularly difficult and particularly rewarding to practice are arcs, secondary motion, and follow through and overlapping action. As I mentioned a little earlier, starting to understand how arcs are used in animation really helped the motion of the knees, for example, trying to get the leg movement to feel and appear fluid, and also the hair as well. For that secondary motion to try to bring in character and realism, I tried to bring a real weight to her steps, like she's a strong character, she's pretty decisive and straightforward in her personality, and having her stand up very straight with her unsheathed sword on her shoulder was another secondary motion choice I used to show character as well. And finally, to bring in sort of an organic feel, add some offset motion, adding in the cloak, her swaying hair, and also her little hair curl kind of boinging along as she walks, are a few things that I added in to practice follow through and overlapping action, since physics affects these things a whole lot differently than it affects the rest of her body. So once I was content enough with the movement of each cycle to move into the final cleanup, it was time to figure out what colors I wanted to use for this and add in some of the simplified backgrounds. I do this by fully coloring and finishing one frame, so I have a reference frame I know I like the colors of, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm using my lineless style for this so I can use a lot of color blocks. It just makes things easier for me personally, since I have more of a painter brain than an inker brain at this point. This lets me get everything done pretty quickly with my lasso tool and calligraphy pen, and at this point I also messed around with blend modes and gradients to get the mood of the lighting just right before I move forward with all of the frames. I took a while to figure out the base coloring for the animation. I'm pretty happy with the base colors for Rose here. I think this is what I'm going to do for all the frames going forward, and the base background is pretty good. I still need to figure out how to add that kind of parallaxing effect since she's walking forward towards the camera, so I think the frames in the background are going to move out slightly, and I'm going to have to figure out how to animate the grass so that it looks like it's moving with her. I think I have a general plan down for this, so now it's just repeating this for 15 more frames. And 16 more frames after that for the other cycle. You know what that means.
Montage.
Observe as my mug of coffee changes throughout the time lapse, indicating just how far my caffeine addiction has gone.
36 frames, 2 days. I feel like Jeff Probst.
One survivor.
And an unspecified amount of hours later, I'm finally done with the first render pass of both walk cycles. I also feel a little bit like I glitched into a different reality for the past 2 days. Animators, y'all actually do this? This is your man? I have just been having such a super difficult time this week. I mean, animation is just so much harder than I thought it would be. I'm kidding. This is incredibly difficult. I'm dying currently. So because my method of animation is extremely convoluted, the software that I'm using doesn't have like a playback timeline that I know how to use exactly. It has one, I just don't know how to use it. So I haven't even seen the playback of this animation in its current form. I saw the sketch and that's it. So now that I'm done with the rendering, I've got to go into my editing software and actually time this and sort of composite everything together to see how it looks, and of course to see what I need to change, because I don't expect to have gotten this anywhere close to where I want it to be on the first try. That would be far too convenient. So I'm not going to go too in depth with this part of my animation process today, because like I've mentioned in past, it is entirely too convoluted, and I also think I'm going to do a dedicated video on this at some point. If that's something you guys really want to see, comment below. So first of all, on the sidewalk cycle, I have split all of my background components up into separate PNG files that I now have to import into my software. Here they are on a folder so that you can see them. I have 2 frames for the sky, and all the difference that's going on here is one of them, the stars are a little glowier than the other. Wow, it's a subtle difference. We're really talking business now. And I like doing this in this software because I can just throw a cross dissolve on 2 frames. And they're sort of like timed at a place that I think is decent enough. I'm not using any math here today. And then I can just duplicate that over and over again. We are so technical. And if I was being smart, I wouldn't go in and manually put this cross dissolve on every single one, but I'm not being smart here today. But the general effect is just, it makes a slow pulse on the glow. Brilliant, I know. Okay, so the next clip that I have here is a wood line that is wide. I think this file is like 4,000 pixels wide or long or whatever. Basically, what I'm gonna do with this clip is I'm gonna start at the very end here. I'm gonna go up here, keyframe it, and then go to the very end of the clip over here, keyframe that, and that frame is gonna move all the way over to the other side. So since this plane of trees is like the furthest away, it'll move like so. In addition to that wood line, I have a second wood line here that's a little bit smaller, a little bit closer up. So I'm gonna basically take this and do the exact same thing. I have this much kind of longer file so that the pace of this tree line moves a good bit faster. And yeah, we'll see. This definitely works for like a distance composition of the shot. All right, next. So I just did a jiggle animation for the grass plane. And for this, here comes the convoluted part. The length of this clip is completely random. I keep these frames as like the same kind of length, just so it's consistent for everything that I time this way. Stupid, it's not using anything mathematical. It's just vibes. So I got frame 1 and frame 2 and frame 3, and that's it. I'm gonna take these 3 frames. So what I do here is I have my frames and then I just copy paste them a whole freaking bunch. So I have a bunch of frames. Select right click, create compound clip. So now this is all one clip, and when you play it back, it's super fast. We don't want it that fast. So now I can alter the playback speed. I like this way because it's so easy to alter. See, that's a little slow. Maybe we'll do more like 40. I would say that that's pretty decent. And of course, another way to do this would be just to create another super long clip and keyframe it the same way I did with the grass plane. Now, whenever I play all this back as a background, I can do this. And we have a nice little moving, parallaxing background that's going to synchronize well with my character. There's still a couple of things that I might want to tweak before like the final composition, but I am really just trying to see how everything goes together at this point. So next, it's time to actually do the actual character frames. This is what this animation file looks like right now, because I have other unedited bits of this video just chilling in here. These are the conditions that I work under. Frame 3, frame 4. What if I just name every frame and make you sit through that in the edit of this video? Would that be fun for you? I feel like mush. I think one thing I've discovered is like I can't with this. I can't draw the same thing. The same thing. It's just too much. So whenever I play this back, this should be ridiculously fast and scare us a little bit. Let us indulge. Brisk pace, my dear. So now again, we're going to, hello? No one asked you, okay. I think I have 2 loops for the whole playback. So I have been consistently putting these at 60% because I've been timing them with the same amount of frames. It means nothing. It's my broken internal logic, don't ask questions. So compound clip, and there we go, there's the playback of the first bit. I'm not allowed to see this because I'm saving this on the front walk cycle animation for dessert. You're not long enough, come here, come here. Stop not doing what I want you to do. How dare you? Okay, sick, sick. I'm gonna go and just copy it a bunch. So, folks, would you like to see this in its almost rendered form and see how much work I have to do in order to fix any problems? Let's do it. There she is! Look at her walking. Wow, she's so talented. It's just so weird and wild to me how we can do this on like a home PC now. Listen, I get that I'm like 10 years behind on my bewilderment, but still, it's just cool. It looks like immediately in one of these frames, I forgot the shadow. Yeah, you see that flash? There it is. There it is. That's awkward. But otherwise, things are pretty decent for the most part. I mean, there's a bit of an awkward head bop going on. I would say the cape is also it's a little jittery, which is also an issue I'm having with the front walk cycle. Like at this point, I'm kind of just here to tweak things a little bit and make the animation more interesting because I'm running out of time.
So, also, I haven't fully done this, but one of my favorite things to do with little animations like this, love doing like a little bit of sound design on these. Hold on, I just turned the volume down. You'll see the full thing later on. So, okay, to try to put things as concisely as possible, here are the things that I am wanting to do next before I wrap this up and actually call it good. Hopefully by the next time I see all of you folks, I will have a pretty little finished animation to show you, complete with looping clips and sound effects and all that nonsense. So after deciding I'd had enough of not being able to play back my animation as I'm working on it, I finally thought I'd figure out how to use the animation timeline in Clip Studio since it would make my life drastically easier. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't do this sooner, allow me to introduce you to the absolutely baffling animation interface of Clip Studio, where frames are called layers and layers are called folders, and I'm calling 911 because Clip Studio is trying to kill me. After watching literally 3 different very helpful tutorials that didn't help me with a very specific task I needed to do, I dumb-lucked my way into figuring out how to add an animation I had already done to Clip's timeline, and I was finally able to onion skin and play back my sequence properly and get this show on the road. For the front walk cycle, things I focused on were cleaning up the breastplate and the overall armor, fixing the hands and the position of the sword, adding a couple of smear frames, making sure her little hair tuft was falling on a nice curve and giving the cloak more of a graceful swing. I also added some finishing touches like highlights and a few blinks for the cycle before moving on to the sidewalk, which had similar problems but somehow proved to be significantly harder for me to figure out. I swear, the amount of times I reanimated the hair tuft in the cloak is just embarrassing. I have no idea why both of these things were more difficult to animate from a side view. Despite having more than enough time to finish this last night, I had to sleep on it before waking up today and grasping that it would be easier to use an arc as a guide for both of these motions, which finally helped me get them to look good. Wow. Finally, I dropped all of my frames back in Davinci Resolve to composite the scene and mess around with some sound, and with that, my final walk cycle sequence is complete.
Hello, and welcome to the end of the video. Did we do it or did we do it? Achievement unlocked? Walk cycles? Not gonna lie, I'm a little proud of myself today. So, final thoughts. Are the animations perfect? Absolutely not. There's still so many things that I need to improve on, but like this is a really great start. It feels substantial. It feels like a good beginner accomplishment. I absolutely want to continue this animation journey. There's so many cool things that I could see myself doing with this. That being said, doing it on like an often regular basis, I'm not cut out for it. There's a reason why I didn't go into animation, and for all the complaining that I did in this video, like, there's a lot of truth to it. It is very, very hard. It's repetitive work. And I have the utmost respect for animators and people who do this very well, people who do this for a living in order to bring all of the wonderful pieces of media that I love to life. It's absolutely incredible. Every single one of you are stronger people than I am. As I mentioned, I would also love to make a video on how I make my animatics, like animation for like YouTube, or at least my style of YouTube video, because it is different. There's somewhat of a method to my madness, I'll say that. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see, or if more animation adjacent content in general is something you'd like to see. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this excursion into walk cycle animation. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. If you did, I need sleep. But as always, the biggest thank you for this video and every single one of my videos goes to my patrons, and especially my executive producers. As always, a massive thank you goes to Call Me Ash, Blaze Ravenscar, Lunira, I Help, Faith, Mossy Raven, Smash the Like button, I'm not saying that name on the internet, ABW Makes, Sarah, Crimson Moon 04, Awendu, Liana, Ermler Jean, Anubix, Breeza,
Sony, Brian, Phoenix, Rose Draconi, Ira, Freedom and Gus Gus, Kat, Dodo, Zyle S, Agent.Sketchy, Thea Maia, Lovisa, Eloquent Silence, Megan Penland, Enozine, India Gloom, Hypnos, Katie, Sweet Winter Garden, Gravity Drop, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, and Bean the Bread.
I had 2 cups of coffee today, and I have anxiety, so I should have learned by now that that's not a good idea.